Hello and welcome to the Armory. Today we are talking about Sporterized rifles. And here on the table we have a few of them, including one that is not, but we will talk about that and the reason why it's on this table for this video. But first, today's video is brought to you by Blackout Coffee. And I've partnered with Blackout Coffee because their coffee is really good. They are pro Second Amendment, and if you can donate coffee to deployed troops through Operation Blackout. But first, let's start off here. What is a Sporterized rifle? A Sporterized rifle is any military firearm that was converted for hunting purposes. It was fairly common in the early 20th century for rifles to be sold off from the militaries, brought back from wars, and turned into Sporterized rifles. It was seen as more cost effective at the time. So a lot of firearms, such as this Craig here, this Car 98 here, and even model of 1917s were sold off, and a lot of people Sporterized them for less money than it was to buy firearms that were specifically made for sporting, like hunting. And they were highly accurate and well sought after. So the big thing is Sporterized rifles have actually started off around the 18th century, but it wasn't really that common from my research. It really didn't really start taking off until about the very early 20th century, where we got examples like the Craig here that I was just talking about, where this one here, and let's get a close-up on this. This one here, we do have, it was actually, from the serial number on it, I did a little research. It was a much longer barrel, but a lot of people like the carbine lengths. So this one here, this specific one here, was shortened down and the stock cut to give it a much shorter length, much lighter. And this is a great example of a minor sporting rifle. So instead of going heavy and drilling into it, putting scopes on this, I suspect this was done very early 20th century, when a lot of hunters were still using their iron sights. Because, there's no drill marks in this, but it is very lightweight. This is one that, if I really wanted to, I could remilitarize like we did on the Berthier project video that I did about a month ago. Another example of some of the sporterizations that were done is one like this K98AZ. And I got this one because I was actually originally planning on remilitarizing it, but after I brought it home and really started looking into it, first, finding parts for this rifle is already very hard as is, because it is an AZ model, which has a different front sight, different rear sight. Stocks are different than the Car 98K. And so finding a lot of the metal parts and the stock for it is, because they aren't as common as the Car 98K, it's just not feasible to try to remilitarize this unless I can find all the parts to do it. But even still, one of the big problems that we're going to run into on this one, which is very common on Sporterized rifles, was, if we zoom in here, this one here, to make this scope mount fit on it, the receiver itself was modified. It was shaved down to allow that flat surface for this receiver, for this mount to be mounted on. And that, unfortunately, is also a common practice on these rifles, just so that things will fit so they can use them for hunting. And I come from a collector standpoint, that I like firearms that have not been touched, have not been, as they coined the phrase, bubbaed. But to be honest, back when this rifle was probably purchased, from stories I've heard, after World War I, World War II, a lot of these rifles were brought home, put in a barrel at a hardware store, sold at Sears online, or not before the online. It was sold at Sears through catalogs, and they were cheaper to buy than your sporting rifles. So it was this was before collectability was really a thing. So they were bought up, turned into sporting rifles, and people didn't think anything of it because the idea of collecting, military history collecting, and value of it just wasn't there. There were so many of them, they didn't care. But now, as the times have changed, the idea of taking one of these old rifles and doing this, a lot of people see it almost as blasphemy to do so, just because you're taking a rifle that's now worth anywhere between $800 and $1,500 and turning it into a $150 rifle. I mean, me personally, you do what you want to do. It's your rifle. But I personally prefer rifles in original military equipment, such as the ones here on the wall. But there are some, unfortunately, where you can get them at a really cheap price, and it's not really worth putting money into, especially if there are a dime a dozen. And that's actually going to take us to our next one here, this Chinese Type 53. And this one was very minorly done. As you can tell, the stock is painted on it. The metal has been Duracoated. This actually, I know the history on why this was done. This rifle used to belong to my dad before he passed away. And when he got it, like a lot of Chinese rifles, the stock was destroyed. There was chunks of wood missing on it, cracks in it. So what he did was, and some of it's covered up with some of this stuff on here, he used wood putty to fill it in, reshape it, and it just would not look right just to leave it in the wood. So being that these were dimes a dozen, he went ahead and wanted to try his hand at Duracoating, so he Duracoated this. He also Duracoated my Spanish Mauser at the same time to try it, just to try it out, see what it did. And he painted the stock like this, and I can understand why he did it. I mean, at the time, finding wood for this was a $100 rifle when he bought it. $99 is, I think, what he paid for it. And at the time, putting that, just looking for a stock, and like we did on the Berthier, looking for a stock for it just really wasn't feasible. He already fixed the stock to be usable, so he just painted it and moved on. So now it's usable, but it holds no significant historical value. But another common thing that a lot of them did, and when if you're looking for like a quick project gun, if you're looking to find a rifle that was sporterized, we had my Berthier. I mean, here you can see the stock on it. All they really did on this Berthier carbine, before we remilitarized it, was they just cut the stock down. They didn't try to put a scope on it. They just cut the stock down and went with that. Because, I mean, if you look at it, we have no drill marks for scope mount. I know some manufacturers or some companies out there, they do make scope mounts that are no drill, no tap scope mounts. They go where your leaf sights are. I actually at one point had a K31 that I wanted to use for hunting, but I didn't want to drill it or anything, so I got one of those leaf sight replacement scope mounts, and it mounted up, and I had a long eye relief scope on it. I mean, that's something I did for just for shooting purposes. But when I got rid of the rifle, I took that scope mount off and returned it back to original condition. But that's what I did here with this Berthier. I saw this for a really cheap price. I mean, I've seen these go on Gunbroker from anywhere between $500 and $800, and I paid $150 for this rifle. And even with that, with remilitarizing it, I'm still under what the value is. I mean, am I going to get rid of it anytime soon? No. But it just goes to show that modern days, the collectability of firearms differs from back in the early 40s, the mid to late 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when you could get these old war rifles for dirt cheap. And they were just everywhere. I mean, we're talking about some of these Sporterized rifles. Here we have this pattern 14 that I picked up from my dealer, that I get a lot of my stuff from. Actually, 5 of the rifles on this table I got from him, including this one. But on this one, if we zoom in right here, you can see where where somebody had originally Sporterized this. They did a very minor Sporterization for these rifles, of which I'll talk about here in a minute. But you can see where they drilled into the receiver, and on that they would probably have put a scope mount of some sort. I haven't been able to find out what kind of scope mount they had put on it, but the stock was not the original. The stock that was on this, as you can see in a video that I made of me restocking this rifle, the stock that was on it was probably not the stock that was on it when this was drilled and tapped for a scope mount. I suspect that somebody had already cut down the stock just to make it easier for hunting, and it's just a Sporterization process. Because again, these pattern 14s, the model in 1917 was a very common rifle that was pretty much, it was used as a modern sporting rifle of the time. A lot of times on the 1917s, and even some of these pattern 14s that I've seen on the market, these big large ears on the receiver were cut off to give a flat surface, an even surface with the front of the receiver, so that a scope and mount could be put on here to shoot with. Luckily for this rifle, somebody didn't do that, but the majority of model 1917s I saw years ago, before they became widely available. I mean, there was a time when the only model of 1917s I would see, I'd go to Cabela's or to my dealers or even online, were mostly Sporterized versions of it. Stocks were cut down, the ears were lobbed off, and the only way you could tell what rifle it was by the bolt handle, because it has that unique shape. Do know that Remington did sell civilian models of the hunting of a hunting rifle version with the bolt handle the way it is, because it was such a strong action. But if I remember correctly, I gotta look it up, find out what the model was called. But I think that model did not have the ears like the military model did. But it was a popular rifle to use because the action was such a robust action that you could basically rechamber it for much more powerful rounds than other rifles could handle at the time. So they became very, very popular. And millions of these things were made in only a short amount of time. And after World War I, the majority of 1917s were sold off on the civilian market, where they were just turned into Sporterized rifles. But a lot of the rifles that I have actually personally have seen Sporterized are, I've seen the Craig here. They're common. Mauser action rifles such as the K98, Yugo Mausers, the Springfield 1903s. I've seen quite a few of them that have been Sporterized over the years. 1917s, as we were just talking about. I mean, I've seen a couple Berthiers that were Sporterized, but being that the cartridge is such a hard cartridge to find, you don't really see that. I've seen quite a few infield number 1s that were Sportified, number 4s that were Sportified. I've actually seen just the other day a number 5 that was Sporterized. So I've seen it. Japanese Arisakas were fairly common to Sporterize and even rechamber into popular cartridges for like 30-06. I've seen that. But nowadays it's not really as common to Sporterize a rifle as it was back then. And that is because of the market value of them. Anymore with what is out there now, a lot of these rifles that still have not yet been Sporterized, or even those that were Sporterized, are being reconverted as best they can back to original military condition, such as the Berthier here. And the reason being is just the value of it. It's more valuable in its original military configuration for collectors. Whereas anymore, you can actually get a cheap AR-15 for cheaper than a lot of these Milsurp rifles. Me personally, I prefer Milsurp rifles just because I love the history of them. And if they could talk, I would love to hear where they've been. But modern sporting rifles like the PTR 91 G3, the AR-15, which I don't have one up here right now. The FAL, my dealer has an FAL that's been modernized. It's got the Picatinny rail system on it. It's been modernized just for the modern sporting purposes. And I guess you can say that's modernized Sporterizing, which was called modernizing. But I mean, a lot of rifles that are right now, a lot of rifles that I see that are still being Sporterized and not in the best of ways, because people are trying to modernize it, are the Mosin Nagants. And a couple years ago, okay, they were $100, $150. But just yesterday, I was out and about, and I saw them at one place anywhere between $500 and $600. At another place, almost $1,000 for a Mosin. And I remember when I got this Mosin that's down here that you might not be able to see, I paid $99 for it back in 2007. And so it's like, I could understand then it was a cheap rifle. It was just like in the situation where, like with a lot of these, where they were just so cheap that it was just easier just to convert them over. But now what people are doing with some of them is what they bubba them. They put red dots on them and foregrips and extended magazines on it. And for a purist, they cringe. For anybody else, I mean, again, it's your rifle. You do with it what you want. But this is actually bringing me to the last rifle on the table here, and that is this Carcano. And the reason I brought this here is because I've even made the mistake, I've heard other people make the mistake of seeing one of these and thinking it was a Sporterized rifle, because you don't have any wood here. You just get this lopped off look here, and you just got a bayonet here. And first time I saw one of them, I was, oh gosh, how old was I? I was 16 years old. And I'm like, man, why would somebody do that to that rifle? Because I saw some of like the Finnish Carcanos, and they had some of the stocks that were all the way out here. And so I saw this carbine, and I'm like, why would anybody Sporterize? And that's when I was educated on it. It's like, no, that's how it was made. But some people will mistake these carbines as Sporterized rifles, and they're not, just because they have that missing wood look to it. But you still have the bayonet. It's like, why would you leave the bayonet? No wood. But that's why I brought this one out for the table here, because this one can be misconstrued as a Sporterized rifle, but in reality, it's just it's an interesting little short rifle. And I mean, I like to shoot it. Is it my favorite? By no means is it my favorite. I mean, it's got a kind of a gritty bolt to it, but it's definitely not my favorite, but it is still fun. But if there's anything you'd like to see, I mean, you see all these rifles on the table, you see all the rifles behind me. If there's anything you'd like to see, I'm working on securing a range where we can videotape and shoot some of these firearms for you. I actually was just out this morning, talked to an indoor range because it's starting to get cold here, and see about doing some videoing there. I've also talked with another outdoor range that has steel targets. So I'm working on that so that we can get some of these out. I'm working on getting some ammo for the Berthier because 8mm Lebel is not the easiest to find. We are definitely going to be taking the Pattern 14 out, the model in 1917 out, and putting some rounds downrange with that next year. It's just I'm thinking that's probably going to be at the outdoor range because they do allow recording there. But if there's anything on this wall you'd like to see, I do plan on doing. I had a survey, and the two most popular videos on it were this video here and the PTR 91 G3 model. I'm definitely going to be doing a video on that next. But I'm looking at getting some shooting in with that video as well. I'm also thinking about doing a PS90 video or a P90 video. And we are definitely going to be doing a Pattern 14 Model 1917 video for history and development of it, because it is quite honestly, it's quite easy to tell that they came from the same design. But the history on it is, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. So we're going to get working on that one as well. But if there's anything you want to see, I mean, just name it. Just leave a comment in the comments field. Like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time at the Armory.
If you like firearm related content or you wish to learn more, hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and if you wish to support what we do, visit us at thearmoryhub.com. If there's anything you want to see, let us know in the comments below. Links are in the description. We will see you next time at the Armory.